The small fingers stretched toward the black and white keys, barely able to reach across them. Little May sat at her grandmother's old upright piano, a wooden stool beneath her to give her the extra height she needed. At just 3 years old, most children her age were still learning to speak in full sentences. But May was different. The afternoon sun streamed through the living room window, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Outside, other kids from the neighborhood played tag, their laughter floating through the slightly open window. But May didn't seem to notice. Her dark eyes remained fixed on the piano keys as if they held some magical secret only she could see. Her mother, Lynn, stood in the doorway of the kitchen, dish towel still in hand, watching her daughter with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Lynn and her husband Raj were both music teachers at the local community college. She taught voice, he taught theory and composition. Music had always filled their modest home, from classical recordings to impromptu living room concerts. But neither of them had pushed their daughter toward music. They believed that passion couldn't be forced. That's why what was happening before Lynn's eyes seemed so special. Earlier that day, a television commercial had played in the background while May colored in her favorite picture book. The commercial, for a luxury watch brand, had used Beethoven's Fur Elise as its soundtrack. Lynn had noticed May stop coloring, her crayon suspended in midair, head tilted toward the sound. 2 hours later, here she was, sitting at the piano that had belonged to Lynn's mother, picking out the melody one note at a time. "That's it," Lynn whispered to herself, recognizing the distinctive opening notes of Fur Elise. Her eyes widened as May's tiny fingers found the correct keys, slowly but with surprising accuracy, recreating what she had heard only once. Lynn reached for her phone on the counter and began recording, her hand slightly shaking with excitement. She knew what she was witnessing wasn't normal. She'd taught enough beginners to recognize that this kind of musical memory and finger dexterity in a 3-year-old was remarkable. May made mistakes, of course. Her small hand sometimes hit 2 keys instead of 1, and she frowned when the sound didn't match what she had heard on the television. But she would pause, try again, and usually find the right note on the 2nd or 3rd attempt. "Mama," May called out suddenly, turning on the piano bench. "I need help. Can't reach." She pointed to the upper register of the piano, her arm stretching as far as it could. Lynn set her phone down and walked over, sitting beside her daughter on the bench. "Which note are you looking for, sweetheart?" "The high bell sound," May said, trying to explain in her limited vocabulary. Lynn played a few notes in the higher octaves. "Like this one?" May shook her head. "Higher. Like tiny bells." Lynn tried again, playing several notes near the top of the keyboard. "That one." May's face lit up when Lynn hit a particular E note. "That's the sound." Lynn was astonished. Her daughter had not only remembered the melody, but had also recognized that the piece jumped to a specific high note. She played the section herself, showing May how the melody returned to the opening theme after that high note. "Again, please," May requested, watching her mother's fingers intently. Lynn played it once more, slower this time, and May's eyes tracked every movement. When Lynn finished, May immediately tried to imitate what she had seen, her small face screwed up in concentration. The front door opened, and Raj walked in, setting his messenger bag down by the entrance. He was about to call out a greeting when Lynn put her finger to her lips, gesturing for him to come quietly. He approached the living room, eyebrows raised in question, then stopped in his tracks when he saw May at the piano, carefully picking out the notes to Fur Elise with Lynn beside her. "How long has this been going on?" he whispered. "Almost an hour," Lynn replied softly. She heard it on TV just once. Raj's expression shifted from surprise to wonder as he watched his daughter. As a music theory professor, he understood better than most how unusual this was. Children May's age typically lacked both the physical coordination and the cognitive ability to reproduce music this way after a single hearing. As the evening progressed, May remained at the piano, taking breaks only when coaxed away for dinner and then her bath. But each time she returned to the piano, determined to get more of the melody right. By bedtime, she could play the first 8 measures with remarkable accuracy for her age. "What do you think this means?" Raj asked later that night as they sat at the kitchen table, speaking in hushed tones over cups of tea. Lynn twirled her spoon thoughtfully. "I'm not sure. I've never seen anything like it in my students, even the talented ones." "Me neither," Raj agreed, running a hand through his hair. Do you think we should find her a teacher? At 3? Lynn questioned. Most teachers won't take students until they're at least 5 or 6. But she's clearly ready now, Raj pointed out. If we wait, we might miss a critical window. They debated late into the night, weighing the benefits of early training against the risk of pushing too hard too soon. Both had seen talented young musicians burn out under the pressure of excessive expectations. Neither wanted that for their daughter. The next morning, May woke earlier than usual. Lynn found her already at the piano in her pajamas, feet dangling from the bench, trying to recreate what she had learned the previous day. "Good morning, little musician," Lynn said, kissing the top of her head. May looked up with a serious expression unusual for a child so young. "I remembered it in my dreams, Mama." Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. May would spend hours at the piano learning more of Fur Elise bit by bit. Lynn and Raj took turns sitting with her, gently guiding her fingers to the correct keys when she struggled. They were careful not to push, but they didn't need to. May drove herself, returning to difficult passages again and again until she mastered them. Word of May's unusual ability spread through their small circle of friends and colleagues. One evening, Dr. Chen, the chair of the music department where Lynn and Raj taught, came to dinner. After the meal, May gave what had become her customary concert, now able to play nearly 30 seconds of the piece. Dr. Chen observed in silence, his expression growing increasingly amazed. When May finished, he turned to her parents. "I've been teaching music for 40 years, he said quietly, "and I've maybe seen this level of natural ability 2 or 3 times. You need to contact Nadia Patel." Lynn and Raj exchanged glances. Nadia Patel was something of a legend, a former concert pianist who now taught only the most promising young musicians. Getting an audition with her was nearly impossible. "She doesn't take children under 6, Raj said, shaking his head. "She'll take this one," Dr. Chen replied with certainty. "I'll call her myself." 2 weeks later, Lynn and Raj found themselves in Nadia Patel's elegant studio across town. May, dressed in her favorite yellow dress with tiny butterflies, seemed unimpressed by the grand piano that dominated the room, a far cry from her grandmother's upright. Nadia herself was a small woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her reputation for strictness made both Lynn and Raj nervous, but her eyes were kind as she bent down to May's level. "Hello, young one. I hear you can play piano." May nodded solemnly. "I play Fur Elise. It's my favorite." "That's a very difficult piece," Nadia said, watching May carefully. "Would you play some of it for me?" Raj lifted May onto the piano bench, which was much higher than the one at home. Nadia adjusted it to its lowest setting and placed a cushion on it. Even then, May's feet dangled well above the floor. "Whenever you're ready," Nadia said gently. May stared at the keys for a moment, seeming slightly intimidated by the grand piano. She pressed one key tentatively, then another, getting a feel for how differently it responded compared to her grandmother's old upright. Then, with the serious concentration that had so surprised her parents, she began to play. The notes of Fur Elise filled the studio, played slowly but with remarkable precision for a child so young. When she made a mistake, she paused, corrected herself, and continued, showing a musical awareness that belied her age. Nadia's expression remained neutral, but her eyes missed nothing. When May finished the section, she knew she looked up expectantly. "Would you like to learn the next part?" Nadia asked. May nodded eagerly. Nadia sat beside her on the bench and played the next section slowly and clearly. "Watch my fingers," she instructed. May's eyes followed every movement. When Nadia finished, May immediately tried to replicate what she'd seen. She didn't get it all right the first time, but she captured the essence of the passage. Nadia played it once more, and May tried again. This time she got closer. After 20 minutes, Nadia stood up and turned to Lynn and Raj. "I'll take her," she said simply. 3 times a week, half-hour sessions to start. We'll see how she progresses." Later, as they drove home, May fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from the intensity of the audition. Lynn reached back to brush a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" she asked Raj softly. He glanced at May in the rearview mirror. "I don't know if there is a right thing in a situation like this, but I do know that whatever path we choose, we need to remember she's still a child first and a pianist second." Lynn nodded, watching the streetlights cast moving shadows across her sleeping daughter's face. In just a few weeks, their lives had changed direction in a way they never could have predicted. Where this new path would lead, neither of them knew, but as May's tiny chest rose and fell in peaceful slumber, one thing was certain: an extraordinary journey had begun. The first piano lesson with Ms. Patel was nothing like what Lynn and Raj had expected. There were no strict drills, no stern corrections, no demands for perfect posture. Instead, Ms. Patel sat cross-legged on the floor with May, playing a game with colored stickers. Each color is a different note, she explained, placing a red sticker on middle C, a blue one on D, and so on. We're making a rainbow on the keyboard. May's eyes lit up as she helped place the stickers. When they finished, Ms. Patel guided her through a simple exercise using the colors rather than traditional note names. By the end of the 30-minute session, May was playing a short melody using the colored notes and giggling with delight. But when will she learn proper technique? Raj asked afterward, while May explored the small collection of musical toys Ms. Patel kept in her waiting room. Ms. Patel smiled knowingly. She already is. Did you notice how naturally her hand position formed when she was reaching for the colored keys? How her wrists stayed level? Children this young learn through play, not discipline. The technique will come, but the joy must come first. Lynn squeezed her husband's hand. I think what Ms. Patel is saying makes sense. Remember how we both had those teachers who made us hate practicing? 3 times a week they brought May to the studio. Each lesson seemed more like playtime than work. Yet Ms. Patel was cleverly embedding fundamental skills through games and stories. She taught May about rhythm by having her walk, hop, and dance to different beats. She taught finger strength through puppet plays where each finger was a character with its own voice and movements. At home, they never had to remind May to practice. The piano drew her like a magnet. Her grandmother's old upright had been professionally tuned, and Raj had built a special bench that could be adjusted as she grew. Every morning, they would wake to the sound of May playing. Sometimes the exercises Ms. Patel had given her, sometimes her own made-up tunes, and always, inevitably, returning to Fur Elise. It's like she's having a love affair with that piece, Lynn remarked one evening as they listened to May work through a difficult passage again and again. Ms. Patel says it's unusual for a child her age to connect so deeply with a single piece of music, Raj replied. Most jump from piece to piece, always wanting something new. By the time May turned 4, she had mastered the first page of Fur Elise. Her birthday celebration was small, a few neighborhood children, grandparents on video call from across the country, and a cake shaped like a piano. Ms. Patel came bearing a special gift, a real printed copy of the complete Fur Elise score, bound in a child-sized folder with May's name embossed in gold on the cover. This is a big girl score, Ms. Patel told her seriously. No more colored stickers. You're ready for the real notes now. May received the gift with surprising reverence, running her small fingers over her name on the cover. I'll learn all of it, she promised solemnly, and so began a new phase in her journey. The lessons became longer, 45 minutes now. And while they still incorporated games and stories, Ms. Patel introduced more structured elements. May learned to read music, not just by rote memorization of where to place her fingers, but by understanding the relationship between the notes on the page and the keys on the piano. It's like a secret code, May explained excitedly to her parents. The dots are hiding the music inside them. Winter turned to spring and spring to summer. May's progress accelerated at a pace that astonished even Ms. Patel. By midsummer, she could play the entire Fur Elise, though the technically challenging middle section still gave her trouble. Her small hands struggled to reach some of the intervals, and the rapid arpeggios sometimes tangled her fingers. Be patient, Ms. Patel counseled when frustration brought tears to May's eyes during a particularly difficult lesson. Remember, Beethoven wrote this for grown-up hands. Yours are still growing, but I want to play it right now, May insisted, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I understand, Ms. Patel said gently. Let me show you something. She took May's hand and placed it against her own adult-sized one. See the difference? Your hand will grow just like the rest of you, but your heart and your ears are already the perfect size for making beautiful music. This seemed to satisfy May, who nodded thoughtfully and returned to the passage with renewed determination. As fall approached, Ms. Patel invited Lynn and Raj to stay after one of May's lessons for a serious conversation. I've been teaching gifted children for 30 years, she began once May was happily occupied with a puzzle in the waiting room. In all that time, I've encountered perhaps 3 or 4 students with May's level of natural ability. She leaned forward, clasping her hands together. There's an opportunity I think you should consider. The Young Virtuosos International Competition is accepting video applications for next year's event. Lynn and Raj exchanged worried glances. They had heard of the competition. It was prestigious, intense, and typically featured children much older than May. Isn't she too young? Lynn asked. She's only 4. The minimum age is 6, Ms. Patel acknowledged. But they occasionally make exceptions for extraordinary talents. Last year they accepted a 5-year-old violinist from South Korea. I don't know, Raj said hesitantly. A competition of that caliber. The pressure would be enormous. It would, Ms. Patel agreed. That's why I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't believe May could handle it. Not just musically, but emotionally. She pulled out her tablet and showed them a video of the previous year's winner, a 12-year-old boy performing a Chopin etude. This is the level of performance we're talking about. The boy played brilliantly, his fingers flying over the keys with precision and passion. Lynn felt a knot form in her stomach. May is good, but May has something special, Miss Patel interrupted. Something you can't teach. Yes, this boy has excellent technique, but May has an innate musicality that's extremely rare. When she plays Fur Elise, she's not just reproducing notes, she's telling a story. They agreed to think about it, spending the next week in long discussions after May went to bed. They researched the competition, watched videos of past participants, and consulted with Dr. Chen, who strongly supported Ms. Patel's recommendation. But what if she fails? Lynn worried late one night. What if she gets up on that stage and freezes? She's so little. Or what if she succeeds? Raj countered. What then? Are we ready for what that might mean for our lives? For hers? Their decision came in an unexpected moment. They had taken May to a local community concert where a pianist was performing Beethoven's works. When Fur Elise began, May sat up straight, her whole body alert, eyes wide with wonder. As the piece progressed, her small hands moved in her lap, silently playing along. When the final notes faded, she turned to her parents with shining eyes. I want to play like that, she whispered, on a big stage with people listening. The following week, they told Ms. Patel they would apply for the competition. If May wanted to share her music with the world, they would help her do it. Preparing the application video became their focus. Ms. Patel recommended a local recording studio with a beautiful grand piano. They scheduled the session for a Saturday morning when May would be fresh and rested. The night before the recording, May couldn't sleep. Lynn found her sitting in bed, silently moving her fingers through the motions of Fur Elise. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Lynn asked, sitting beside her. May nodded. What if I make a mistake? Then you make a mistake, Lynn said simply. And life goes on. The sun will still shine, we'll still love you, and you'll still get to play piano. But I want it to be perfect, May insisted. Lynn smiled. Perfect isn't always interesting. Sometimes the most beautiful music has little imperfections that make it real, that show there's a human heart behind the notes. The recording session went surprisingly well. May, dressed in her favorite blue dress with tiny silver stars, approached the grand piano with a confidence that belied her age. There were a few false starts. A door slamming in the hallway startled her once, and she stumbled over a tricky passage twice, but on the 4th take, something magical happened. May played Fur Elise as if she were having a conversation with Beethoven himself. Her tiny fingers danced across the keys, bringing out melodies that even Ms. Patel hadn't emphasized in their lessons. When she finished, the recording engineer, a gruff man who had seen thousands of musicians come through his studio, had tears in his eyes. That wasn't a 4-year-old playing, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't just a kid at a piano. They submitted the video 2 days before the deadline. The waiting began. Ms. Patel assured them it could be months before they heard anything, so lessons continued as usual. May started learning new pieces, a simple Mozart sonata, a Schumann piece written for children, but Fur Elise remained her touchstone, the piece she returned to again and again. 6 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, an email arrived that would change everything. We are pleased to inform you that May has been accepted as a special exception to participate in the Young Virtuosos International Competition. Lynn read the message 3 times before calling Raj at work. By the time he raced home, she had already printed out the official invitation with its gold-embossed letterhead. They actually accepted her, Raj said in disbelief, staring at the letter. Our 4-year-old daughter is going to compete in Vienna. That evening, they sat May down and explained as simply as they could what the invitation meant. She would play her beloved Fur Elise on a very special stage, far away across the ocean, with important musicians listening. Will they like my playing? May asked. Some will, Lynn said honestly. Some might not. That's how art works. Not everyone hears the same thing when they listen to music. May considered this for a moment, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. I just want to play my best, she said, for Beethoven. Later, after May had gone to bed, Lynn and Raj sat at their kitchen table with calendars and budgets spread before them. The competition was 6 months away, a lifetime in the development of a young child, but barely a heartbeat in the world of international musical preparation. Everything's going to change now, isn't it? Lynn said softly. Raj reached across the table and took her hand. Maybe, but some things never will. She's still our May, first and always. Outside, the rain tapped a gentle rhythm on the windows. Nature's own music, accompanying the beginning of their greatest adventure. The world discovered May on a Tuesday morning when a local news station aired a short segment about the 4-year-old piano prodigy, headed to Vienna. By Wednesday afternoon, the video had spread across social media like wildfire. By Friday, their phone wouldn't stop ringing. I've had calls from 3 national news programs, a documentary filmmaker, and something called Viral Virtuosos, Raj said, scrolling through the messages on his phone with a bewildered expression. This is getting out of hand. Lynn sighed, watching May through the window as she played in the backyard with the neighbor's cat, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. What should we do? We can't just ignore it. Actually, maybe we can, Raj suggested. At least most of it. She doesn't need this kind of pressure. They decided to grant a single interview to a respected classical music program, hoping that would satisfy the media's curiosity. The reporter, a kind-faced woman named Diane, came to their home the following week. She spoke with May first, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the living room while May showed her a picture book about Beethoven. Do you know why people like your playing so much? Diane asked gently. May considered this, her small forehead wrinkled in thought. Because I love the music? She suggested finally. I think that's exactly right, Diane agreed. When you play, people can hear how much you love it. The resulting 10-minute feature was tasteful and warm, focusing not on May as a circus act, but as a child with an extraordinary connection to music. It showed her playing, of course, but also drawing pictures, helping her mother water the plants and falling asleep with her favorite stuffed penguin tucked under her arm. You make music because you love it. Diane's voiceover concluded as the camera showed May spontaneously dancing to a Beethoven symphony playing on the living room speakers. And we love listening because your joy reminds us what music is really for. The piece should have satisfied public curiosity. Instead, it exploded it. Within days, the video had millions of views. Comments poured in from around the globe, many from parents claiming their own children showed similar talents if only they had the right opportunities. Classical musicians debated whether such early training was beneficial or harmful. Child development experts weighed in on both sides. It's gotten political somehow, Lynn said in disbelief, reading through an online forum where May was being held up as either proof of the benefits of early arts education or evidence that some children were simply born with gifts that couldn't be taught. Ms. Patel called an emergency meeting at her studio. This is exactly what I was afraid might happen, she said grimly. The spotlight can be blinding for young talents. We need to shield her from as much of this as possible. Together, they crafted a plan. All media requests would be politely declined. Their home phone number was changed to an unlisted one. May's lessons would continue as normal, with no visitors allowed. Most importantly, they would do everything in their power to keep May's daily life as ordinary as possible. She's still a little girl who needs to play, make friends, scrape her knees, and believe in fairy tales, Ms. Patel reminded them. That has to come first before any competition. For a few weeks, the strategy worked well. The media circus moved on to newer stories, and the family settled back into their routine. May continued her lessons 3 times a week, now supplemented with basic music theory, taught through colorful workbooks and movement games. Ms. Patel began to refine May's technique on Fur Elise polishing, transitions between sections and helping her find creative solutions for passages her small hands couldn't quite manage traditionally. You have to roll this chord, Ms. Patel demonstrated, showing how to break the notes slightly rather than trying to play them all at once. Beethoven himself probably did it this way too, you know. His hands were big, but not as big as some people think. May giggled at the thought of Beethoven struggling with the same passages she did. It made him seem more real somehow, less like the stern face in her picture book and more like a friend who understood the challenges of bringing music to life. As spring arrived, so did their first major hurdle. An online video platform removed May's performance video, claiming it violated their age policies. The takedown triggered a fresh wave of controversy, with supporters and critics alike weighing in on whether a 4-year-old belonged in the public eye at all. Maybe we should withdraw from the competition, Lynn suggested one night after a particularly exhausting day spent fielding calls from concerned friends and family. Is this really worth it? Before Raj could answer, they heard the soft notes of Fur Elise drifting from the living room. They found May at the piano, playing by memory in the dimming evening light. Completely absorbed in the music, I think that's our answer, Raj said softly. The competition was now just 3 months away. Ms. Patel increased their lessons to 4 times a week and introduced me to recordings of great pianists performing Beethoven. They would listen together. May curled up on a beanbag chair, Ms. Patel pointing out different interpretations of the same passages. Hear how this pianist takes more time here, and this one plays it faster but softer. There's no single right way to play it. The music is alive, and each person who plays it adds something of themselves. May soaked up these lessons like a sponge, experimenting with subtle variations in her own playing. Sometimes she would stop mid-practice and declare, I want to try it sadder here, or this part should smile more. Ms. Patel encouraged this intuitive approach, gently balancing it with technical precision. As word of May's upcoming competition appearance spread through musical circles, unexpected support arrived. A renowned piano manufacturer offered to loan a special scaled keyboard designed for children's hands, allowing May to practice on an instrument that wouldn't strain her physically. A famous pianist who had won the same competition 20 years earlier sent a handwritten note of encouragement, along with a recording of his own early performances. See, he made mistakes too, Lynn pointed out as they listened to the CD together. And he still became one of the greatest pianists alive. May nodded solemnly. Mistakes are okay if you learn from them, she recited one of Ms. Patel's favorite sayings. 6 weeks before the competition, disaster struck. May came down with a severe ear infection that left her in pain and temporarily affected her hearing in one ear. The doctor prescribed antibiotics and strict rest with no piano practice until the infection cleared completely. But I need to practice, May protested weakly from her bed, her face flushed with fever. The competition is soon. Music will wait, Lynn assured her, placing a cool cloth on her forehead. Your health comes first. For 10 long days, the piano sat silent. May spent most of her time sleeping or listening to stories Lynn and Raj read to her. When she felt a little better, Ms. Patel came to visit, bringing not sheet music but a set of wooden blocks. We're going to practice in a different way, she explained, setting up the blocks in patterns. Close your eyes and imagine playing. Your fingers will remember when you're well again. This mental practice became their routine. May would lie in bed with her eyes closed, her small fingers moving slightly as she played through Fur Elise in her mind. Sometimes she hummed along, testing her recovering hearing. By the time the doctor cleared her to return to the piano, only 4 weeks remained before the competition. Lynn and Raj worried the illness had set her back too far, but Ms. Patel remained calm. Sometimes stepping away from the instrument deepens our relationship with the music, she said. Let's see what happens. What happened astonished them all. When May finally sat down at the piano again, her playing had transformed. There was a new depth to it, a maturity that hadn't been there before. The notes were the same, but the music felt different, more personal somehow, as if her temporary separation from the physical act of playing had connected her more deeply to the emotional heart of the piece. It's like she had time to think about what the music means to her, Ms. Patel said, visibly moved after May played through the entire piece without a single mistake. This is what I've been trying to teach her all along, but some things can't be taught. They have to be discovered. With renewed confidence, they made final preparations for Vienna. Passport applications were expedited. A small wardrobe of performance-appropriate dresses was purchased. Ms. Patel arranged for May to practice on different pianos to prepare her for the unfamiliar instrument she would face in the competition. 2 weeks before their departure, a package arrived from Vienna. Inside was an official competition program, listing all the participants. May's name appeared on the last page under special entrance, with a small note indicating she was the youngest competitor in the event's history. That evening, after May had gone to bed, Lynn found Raj sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the program. "Are we doing the right thing?" he asked, looking up at his wife with worried eyes. "Taking her halfway across the world to perform in front of judges and critics? She's just turned 4. Lynn sat beside him and took his hand. "I've asked myself that question every day, but then I see her at the piano, and I know she's found something most people search their whole lives for, something that makes her completely herself. I just don't want her to be hurt if things don't go well." "Neither do I," Lynn admitted, "but I think not letting her try might hurt her more in the end." As if summoned by their conversation, May appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "I had a dream," she announced. "I was playing for Beethoven and he was smiling." Lynn and Raj exchanged glances, then Lynn held out her arms. "That sounds like a lovely dream," she said as May climbed onto her lap. "Do you want to tell us more about it?" As May described her dream concert for the great composer, her voice growing sleepier by the minute, Lynn and Raj realized that whatever happened in Vienna, this journey had already given their daughter something precious, a connection to music that transcended competitions and critics, a personal relationship with art that would sustain her long after the applause faded. May fell asleep mid-sentence, her head nestled against Lynn's shoulder. As Raj carried her back to bed, the weight of their decision felt lighter somehow. They were simply following their daughter's lead, walking beside her on a path that, despite its unusual nature, was undeniably hers to travel. Vienna welcomed them with light rain and chilly spring winds. May pressed her face against the taxi window as they drove from the airport to their hotel, taking in the grand old buildings and cobblestone streets so different from home. "It looks like my picture book," she whispered in awe, pointing at a statue of Mozart they passed. "Is Beethoven here too?" "His statue is," Raj explained. "And we'll visit it tomorrow. The real Beethoven lived here a long time ago." Their hotel room was small but comfortable, with a view of a quiet courtyard where an ancient chestnut tree was just beginning to bloom. After the long flight, May fell asleep almost immediately, still clutching the stuffed penguin she'd insisted on bringing, "So he can hear me play." Lynn and Raj sat by the window, speaking in hushed tones while watching their daughter sleep. "I called the competition office again," Raj said. "They've arranged for her to practice tomorrow morning. The hall will be empty except for staff." "Good," Lynn nodded. "I don't want her first time on that stage to be during the actual competition." "How many competitors are there total?" 42. Divided into age categories. Me is officially in the special category, along with 2 other exceptional cases. A 5-year-old violinist and a 7-year-old with a rare condition that affects his growth. Lynn sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "So they've grouped all the unusual ones together. I'm not sure how I feel about that. The organizer I spoke with was actually quite kind. She said they created the special category to give these children an opportunity to showcase their talents without the pressure of competing directly against older, more experienced musicians." "I suppose that makes sense," Lynn conceded, "as long as they're treated with respect." The next morning, they took May to the Musikverein, Vienna's historic concert hall where the competition would be held. The building was imposingly grand, with marble columns and gold leaf details that made May's eyes grow wide. "It's like a palace for music," she gasped. A staff member led them through the empty lobby to the main hall, explaining the building's history along the way. "This is where Brahms conducted, where Mahler's symphonies premiered. The greatest musicians in history have stood on this stage." The main hall was even more breathtaking than the exterior, rows upon rows of seats facing a stage dominated by a gleaming black grand piano. The staff member adjusted a special bench they'd prepared for May and invited her to try the instrument. May approached the piano with unusual hesitation, suddenly looking very small in the vast, empty hall. She turned back to look at her parents, uncertainty written across her face. "It's okay to be nervous," Lynn encouraged her. "Everyone feels that way the first time." Raj knelt beside her. "Remember what Ms. Patel says. It's just you and the music having a conversation. The room doesn't matter." May nodded and climbed onto the bench. Her feet dangled far above the pedals as she placed her hands on the keys. She started with simple scales, testing the piano's touch and sound. The acoustics of the hall magnified every note, creating a richness that seemed to surprise her. Gradually, her confidence returned. She began playing snippets of Fur Elise, stopping occasionally to repeat a passage or try a different approach. After about 15 minutes, she launched into the piece from the beginning. The sound filled the empty hall, echoing off the high ceiling and ornate walls. A few staff members who had been working in other areas drifted in, drawn by the music. They stood silently at the back, watching the tiny figure at the piano with expressions of disbelief. When May finished, there was a moment of complete silence before the small group of workers burst into spontaneous applause. Startled, May turned around, only now noticing her audience. A woman with a clipboard hurried forward. "That was extraordinary," she said in accented English. "I've been organizing this competition for 12 years, and I've never, well..." She composed herself. "You have a remarkable gift, young lady." May smiled shyly. "Thank you. The piano's very nice. It sings when I play it." They spent another hour in the hall, letting May become comfortable with the space and the instrument. The staff brought her cushions for the bench and showed her where she would wait before her performance. They explained the schedule. Preliminary rounds tomorrow. Finals the day after for those who qualified. "You'll be the last performer in your category," the organizer explained to Lynn and Raj. "We thought that might be easier for her, less waiting around." That evening, they took May to see Beethoven's statue as promised. She stood solemnly before the bronze figure of the composer, studying his stern face. An elderly man walking his dog stopped to watch her. "Are you a musician?" he asked May in halting English, noticing how intently she gazed at the statue. "I play piano," she answered. "I'm playing Beethoven's music tomorrow in a big concert." The man smiled kindly. For the Young Virtuosos competition. My grandson played in it 2 years ago. Violin." He looked at Lynn and Raj. "Your daughter, she is very young for this." "Yes," Lynn agreed. "But the music called to her and we're just following where it leads." The man nodded as if this made perfect sense. "That is the only reason to make music. Not for prizes or applause, but because you cannot do otherwise." He bent down to May's level. "Play with your heart tomorrow, little one. Beethoven will hear you." The morning of the competition dawned bright and clear. May was unusually quiet at breakfast, pushing her food around her plate without eating much. "Nervous, tummy?" Lynn asked gently. May nodded. "What if I forget the music?" "Then you'll find it again," Raj assured her. "The notes are in your fingers and in your heart. They won't get lost." The preliminary round wasn't open to the public, only to judges, participants, and their families. As they waited in the designated area for special category performers, May watched the other 2 children in her group. The 5-year-old violinist, a serious boy from South Korea, practiced silently, his fingers moving over his instrument without actually playing it. The 7-year-old, a girl from Italy whose growth condition had left her the size of a toddler, hummed quietly to herself while drawing in a sketchbook. A volunteer approached with a clipboard. "The judges are ready for the first special category performer," she announced. The violinist stood, his face a mask of concentration as he followed her out. Through the closed doors, they could faintly hear his performance, a technically impressive rendition of a Paganini caprice. When he returned, his face revealed nothing of how he thought it had gone. The Italian girl went next, playing a Chopin piece with delicate precision. When she returned, she was smiling slightly, which May seemed to find reassuring. "May Chen," the volunteer called finally. "The judges are ready for you now." Lynn adjusted the bow in May's hair one last time. Raj gave her a quick hug. "Remember, just you and the music having a conversation," he whispered. May walked out, her small back straight. The volunteer adjusting her pace to match May's shorter steps. The waiting room felt suddenly too quiet, too still. Lynn reached for Raj's hand, squeezing it tightly. "I can't bear it," she whispered. "Not being in there with her." She'll be okay, Raj said, hoping it was true. This is what she's been preparing for. Meanwhile, in the main hall, May walked carefully to the grand piano, where 3 judges sat watching her with expressions ranging from skepticism to curiosity. The head judge, a stern-looking woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, leaned forward. "Hello, May," she said. "Whenever you're ready, you may begin." May needed help getting onto the bench, which a volunteer quickly provided along with the cushions they'd prepared. She took a moment to adjust herself, then looked up at the high ceiling, the ornate decorations, the imposing judges. For a second, she seemed frozen. Then she closed her eyes, took a deep breath just as Ms. Patel had taught her, and began to play. From the first delicate notes of Fur Elise, it was clear this was no ordinary performance. May played with a purity of expression that seemed to transform the familiar piece into something new. The technical challenges that had once seemed insurmountable for her small hands now appeared effortless. But it was the emotional quality of her playing that truly set it apart. There was joy in the lilting main theme, a questioning tension in the minor sections, and throughout a sense of discovery, as if she were exploring the music alongside her listeners. The head judge, who had begun taking notes, gradually set her pen down and simply listened, her stern expression softening almost imperceptibly. The youngest judge discreetly wiped a tear from the corner of his eye. When May reached the difficult middle section with its rapid arpeggios, she slowed ever so slightly, not enough to disrupt the flow of the music, but enough to give her small fingers time to find each note with perfect clarity. It wasn't the standard interpretation, but it carried a musical logic of its own, revealing inner voices in the harmony that often went unheard. As she returned to the main theme for the final time, May seemed to forget where she was entirely. Her face reflected every nuance of the music, a slight smile at a playful turn of melody, a furrowed brow during a moment of harmonic tension. When she played the final notes, letting them fade gently into silence, she kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer, as if reluctant to let the music go. The silence that followed seemed to vibrate with the echo of what they had just heard. The head judge cleared her throat. "Thank you, May," she said, her professional tone not quite hiding her amazement. "That was very beautiful." May looked up, suddenly remembering where she was. "Thank you," she said politely. "Beethoven wrote a very nice piece." A flicker of a smile crossed the judge's face. "Yes, he did. And you played it very nicely indeed." Back in the waiting area, May ran to her parents, her earlier nervousness replaced with excitement. "The piano sang so well," she exclaimed. "And I remembered all the parts Ms. Patel and I worked on." "We're so proud of you," Lynn said, hugging her tightly. "No matter what happens next, you've accomplished something remarkable," Raj added. What happened next was the announcement of finalists. All 3 special category performers were selected to continue to the final round the next day, along with 20 others from the regular age groups. As they left the music verein, the competition director stopped them. "Your daughter's performance has created quite a stir," she told Lynn and Raj quietly. "Word has gotten out. I wanted to warn you that there may be media interest tomorrow. We can arrange for a private entrance if you prefer." Lynn nodded gratefully. "That would be best. We want to keep things as normal as possible for her." That night, May fell asleep early, exhausted from the emotional day. Lynn and Raj sat on the tiny hotel balcony, watching the lights of Vienna twinkle in the darkness. "Do you think she has a chance of winning?" Lynn asked. Raj considered the question. "I don't know. The technical skill of some of the older competitors is remarkable, but there's something about May's playing that goes beyond technique." He paused. "Maybe winning isn't what matters most here." "No," Lynn agreed softly. "What matters is that she's found her voice. Everything else is just applause." The morning of the finals arrived with unexpected fanfare. Despite the competition director's efforts to keep things quiet, word had spread through Vienna's musical community about the remarkable 4-year-old pianist. When they arrived at the private entrance of the Musikverein, a small group of local music students had gathered, hoping to catch a glimpse of the young prodigy. "This is getting out of hand," Lynn murmured as they hurried May through a side door. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Unlike the preliminary round, the finals would be open to the public and the hall was expected to be full. Competitors from all categories paced nervously in the preparation rooms, some running through pieces silently on tabletops, others sitting motionless with eyes closed, mentally rehearsing. May seemed oddly calm amid the tension, coloring in a Beethoven-themed activity book Miss Patel had made for her. When a volunteer came to tell them she would perform in 1 hour, she simply nodded and continued carefully staying within the lines of Beethoven's stern face. "Aren't you nervous?" the Italian girl from the special category asked her, pausing from her own anxious pacing. May considered this question seriously. "A little in my tummy," she admitted. "But Ms. Patel says that's just the music getting ready to come out." The girl smiled. "I like that. Maybe my tummy is musical too." The competitors would perform in order of age category, with the special category coming last. As they waited, May and her parents could hear the performances of the older children through the speakers in the preparation area. A 14-year-old boy played a technically dazzling Liszt piece that brought spontaneous applause in the middle of the performance. A 13-year-old girl performed a Rachmaninoff prelude with such emotional depth that Raj found himself blinking back. "Tears, the talent here is unbelievable," he whispered to Lynn. "These kids have been training their whole lives." Lynn squeezed his hand. "So will May if that's what she wants. This is just the beginning of her journey." Finally, it was time for the special category. The Korean violinist went first, followed by the Italian girl. Both gave beautiful performances that were warmly received. Then the announcer's voice came over the speakers. "Our final performer in the special category, and indeed our final performer of the competition, is 4-year-old May Chen from the United States, playing Beethoven's Bagatelle in a minor, commonly known as Fur Elise." A murmur ran through the audience as May walked onto the stage. From the wings, Lynn and Raj watched as their daughter approached the massive grand piano, looking impossibly small in her pale blue dress with tiny silver stars. A stage assistant quickly placed the special cushions on the bench and helped her up. The hall fell completely silent. May looked out at the audience for the first time, her eyes widening slightly at the sea of faces. For a heart-stopping moment, she seemed frozen in place. Lynn gripped Raj's arm so tightly he winced. Then something remarkable happened. An elderly man in the third row, the same man who had spoken to them at Beethoven's statue, gave May a small, encouraging nod. She caught his eye and nodded back. Then she turned to the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. If her preliminary performance had been impressive, her finals performance was transcendent. She played with a freedom and joy that seemed to transform the formal concert hall into a more intimate space, as if she were playing for a gathering of friends rather than a critical audience and stern judges. The difficult technical passages flowed effortlessly from her tiny fingers, but it was the emotional quality of her playing that held the audience spellbound, the way she lingered lovingly on certain phrases, the playful lilt she gave to the main theme, the thoughtful pauses that gave the music room to breathe. When she reached the challenging middle section, a collective tension filled the room. Could such a small child navigate these complex arpeggios? She did more than navigate them. She reimagined them, finding a personal path through the difficult terrain that honored Beethoven's intentions while acknowledging her own physical limitations. It wasn't the standard interpretation, but it carried its own musical truth. As she played the final notes, letting them fade into a whisper, the hall remained utterly silent for a long moment. Then, like a dam breaking, applause erupted from every corner. People rose to their feet, some wiping tears from their eyes, others shaking their heads in disbelief. May looked startled by the response, then broke into a wide smile, bowing shyly as she'd been taught. The judges conferred for nearly an hour after the last performance. May, exhausted by the emotional experience, fell asleep in Lynn's lap in the preparation room, oblivious to the tension around her as other competitors speculated nervously about the results. Finally, all participants were called back to the stage for the announcement of winners. May, still groggy from her nap, clutched her stuffed penguin as she stood in line with the other children. The head judge, the stern woman with the silver bun, stepped forward with a microphone. "Before we announce our age category winners, the judges have decided to present a special award, one that has only been given twice before in the competition's 43-year history." She looked directly at May. "The Beethoven Spirit Award, given to the performer who most embodies the revolutionary spirit of Ludwig van Beethoven, breaking boundaries and revealing new possibilities in music, goes to May Chen." The audience erupted in applause as a confused May was ushered forward. The judge handed her a small golden statue of Beethoven seated at a piano. "Your playing reminded us why we became musicians," she said, the microphone catching her words. "Thank you for that gift." As the regular category winners were announced, Lynn and Raj watched from the wings, tears streaming down their faces. The overall first prize went to the 14-year-old boy who had played Liszt, with the 13-year-old girl taking second place. But it was clear from the buzz in the audience and the way people kept glancing at May that her performance had left the deepest impression. Afterward, as they made their way through the crowd, people stopped them constantly to express their admiration. A renowned piano teacher pressed his card into Raj's hand, offering free lessons should they ever visit Vienna again. A representative from a prestigious music school spoke about special programs for exceptional talents. A recording company executive discussed the possibility of a children's album featuring May, alongside established classical artists. "It's too much," Lynn said later in their hotel room, watching May sleep peacefully. The golden Beethoven statue clutched in one arm, her penguin in the other. "She's still just a little girl." "We'll figure it out," Raj assured her. "One step at a time." The next morning brought a new wave of attention as news outlets around the world picked up the story of the 4-year-old pianist who had captivated Vienna. Their hotel room phone rang constantly until they finally unplugged it. Emails flooded their inbox, interview requests, invitations to perform, offers from agents eager to represent the next great prodigy. "We need to shield her from all this," Lynn insisted, "at least until we get home and can talk to Ms. Patel about how to proceed." Their final day in Vienna, they escaped the attention by taking May to a small, out-of-the-way park where local children played. After days of being exceptional, she reveled in the simple joy of being ordinary, climbing on playground equipment, making a new friend despite the language barrier, eating an ice cream cone that left sticky trails down her chin. "I think this is what she needs most right now," Lynn observed as they watched May laugh with a local girl over a dandelion puff blown into the air. "Room to just be a child. Balance," Raj agreed, between nurturing her gift and protecting her childhood. On the long flight home, May slept most of the way, exhausted from the emotional journey of the past week. Lynn used the quiet time to jot down thoughts in a journal, ideas about how to move forward, concerns to discuss with Ms. Patel, memories she wanted to preserve from this extraordinary experience. Raj leaned over to see what she was writing. "A roadmap for the future?" he asked. "More like questions," Lynn admitted. "How do we help her grow as a musician without losing the joy that makes her playing so special? How do we navigate a world eager to exploit childhood prodigies? How do we know when to push and when to step back?" "Big questions," Raj nodded. "But we don't have to answer them all at once." They were met at the airport by Ms. Patel, who hugged May tightly when she showed off her Beethoven statue. "I knew you could do it," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "Not because you're perfect, but because you play with your heart wide open." In the following weeks, life gradually found a new rhythm. With Ms. Patel's guidance, they developed a careful plan. May would continue her lessons, now increased to 5 times a week. She would give occasional performances, small, carefully selected venues where the atmosphere would be supportive rather than demanding. A limited number of interviews would be granted, always with Lynn or Raj present to ensure the focus remained positive. Most importantly, they made sure May had plenty of time to just be a child, playing with neighborhood friends, visiting the zoo, making messes with finger paints, and occasionally driving them crazy with endless why questions like any 4-year-old. The Beethoven statue found a home not on a shelf of honors, but on the floor beside the piano, where May would sometimes pause during practice to tell him what she was working on. She had begun learning new pieces, a Mozart sonata, a Schumann children's piece, but Fur Elise remained special, a touchstone she returned to when she needed musical comfort. 6 months after Vienna, Lynn found May at the piano one morning, picking out a simple melody with one finger. "That's pretty," Lynn said, sitting beside her on the bench. "Is it something Ms. Patel taught you?" May shook her head. "I made it up. It's a song about my penguin's adventures." Lynn listened as May continued the melody, adding simple harmonies with her left hand. There was an inherent musicality to it, a natural sense of structure unusual in one so young. "Would you like to learn how to write it down?" Lynn asked. "So you don't forget it?" May's eyes widened. Can I do that? Like Beethoven did. Of course. That's how all music begins, with someone hearing something in their head and finding a way to share it. Later, as she watched May carefully drawing her first musical notes on staff paper, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration, Lynn felt a wave of gratitude. Their daughter had found not just a skill or even a passion, but a voice. A way to express herself in a language as old as human emotion and as new as her own unfolding life. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever decisions they would face in nurturing her extraordinary gift while protecting her childhood, this was what mattered most. The joy of discovery, the freedom to create, the courage to share one's unique voice with the world, not just for prodigies but for everyone.